So in this video I'm going to still paint roses, this time as still life with pink and this beautiful peachy pink rose in a glass jar. So we will paint the glass jar as well, and maybe even the tablecloth. It's very tricky, but it's possible. Okay, I'm going to start with a basic drawing just to mark out where everything is. I'm not going to include absolutely everything. All I want is these two flowers that I've shown you in the picture. So one is here, let's say one is here, and the other one is slightly higher up and slightly from the side, so it's kind of this shape. I'm just marking out roughly what shape it is. And then we have the flower pot sort of down here. It's not really a flower pot, it's a glass jar that I've got them in. This is a mechanical pencil I'm using because it's quite good for drawing fine lines, and I don't have to keep sharpening it. So maybe it's somewhere here. I make it a little bit shorter than it is in real life. I mean, I can make these up as I go along, and then I have my tablecloth somewhere here. We'll decide whether the tablecloth will be in it or not later. So at this point I can see this jar has highlights on it, so I'm going to mark these highlights right now so that I won't lose them, hopefully. And there's some here in this shape, so I just draw the shape of the highlights, and there's one here right on the edge. I have to remember this, or I can take a reference photo and refer back to it. So there's some here, and then there's one leaf. There's three leaves actually, small ones. So I'm just going to, one is kind of long, and there's one hanging down here. Just trying to make it look like a rose, the rose leaf. Maybe I put one leaf here hanging down somewhere behind this glass jar. And then my roses. So this one, so it's got this central kind of round area, but it's quite, I can just mark it out with irregular lines, and then it's the outer petals that actually is more defined. So as long as I get that right, it will look like a rose. I could just do this with the brush without the drawing, but this time I decided to make a drawing, and it's very compact, so there's loads of things that I don't have to include every single petal. And then we have these outer leaves here, and then we have these, there's some shadow, and then there's another outer leaf, and then another one. So it's this shape basically, but I could make it out, make up whatever shape I wanted. Now let's do the other one. The other one is slightly from the side, so we can see the side of it here. So this central area is, the swirly bits are here, so I'm just gonna do some of these swirly bits, and then we have some of those outer petals are more defined. So let's say the central bit ends here, and then these are those petals that we can see the edges sort of folding over, and then there's one here, and then finally this outer one. And maybe this another one, something here, another petal. At this point I can sort of reinforce where I see darker shadows, so I'm going to put darker mixes of color into these areas, like for example here up just above these, the bottom petals as they fold over, and then we have this bit. So something like that. And then we have the stem. So the rose stem is not actually straight, it's kind of, it can be bent or it could be sort of going left and right. It's not really, if you look at it, it's not completely straight ever. And this rose's stem is kind of here, but maybe I'll make it look like it's coming like this behind the leaves. We don't have any leaves, I can't see any leaves for this rose, but I'm going to draw in some. So maybe there's something here. Maybe there's something there. Maybe there's a small one as well. Just for the composition. So to improve the composition, I can, so for example, this leaf, I can move slightly. Maybe there's something else here. Maybe there's a leaf behind, but it goes like this. And then another one here. Perhaps there is a leaf there, sort of going like this. So that's it, that's my composition. Oh, and the stems. So the stems are, I'm going to indicate them, but I'm not gonna make them completely straight because they're slightly bent. So this one, for example, it's coming out here. It's coming right here. And the cloth. Shall we include the cloth? Why not? So the cloth has these edges. It's very tricky. Maybe just a few of these. And then it's got these patterns. I'm just going to indicate there's holes on the edges of this cloth. So so it doesn't have to be exact actually. And there's another shape here like this, and the lace kind of comes into this area, and then there's a silky area beyond that. So let's paint this as well. If it's too much, then we can just leave it out or cover it later if it doesn't turn out as we wished. So this goes on, and like I said, we don't have to include the entire all the details. You can just maybe there's some pattern here as well, which there is, but so yeah, that's enough for the drawing. Maybe I'll start with a background for this one. Let's try some burnt sienna and ultramarine, and maybe a bit of lavender. Lavender will make things a little bit more grey. It's a more creamy texture, so I'm just going to start with maybe a bit more blue. And so I want a variation, but I want quite a neutral tone so that my flowers will look and I just go around the flowers. My flowers will look more natural, more bright, and I want to leave some white bits because it's quite nice. So I just vary my colors. In some areas I'll have more lavender, in other areas I'll have more more burnt sienna, and I just go around these. I also leave at the stem at this point because maybe it's highlighted, maybe it's in the sun. So this is my first wash is a consistency of maybe double cream. So you don't want it too light, because once this dries it's going to be far too light, and I want a good consistency, maybe a bit more blue as I go down, and just leave out a few leaves. I don't want to go all the way with this mix, so I think there was this one is a petal. I'll just go around this now, but as I go down, now I'm just using water because there's going to be some green leaves and other things here, so I haven't established them yet. And I'm going to go to the edge of this cloth. I can go over this leaf, it's in the shadow, but I didn't want to go over this cloth because some of my cloth is actually highlighted, it's in the sun. And by the way, I'm using a flat brush, so maybe a bit more lavender just where the edges of this is. And then it also has some smaller details in this lace. So if you go over this with a dry brush, it's probably even better. So you get those little rugged, or if you leave a more dry brush, will create this kind of look where you get white bits as well. So this is my first wash, and then while this is wet, so my cloth has this, the outer layers are quite kind of beigey, and then the middle bit is more white. Just wondering if I should start with the I think I start with this bit. So the sun is coming from this side and the shadows is going here, so there's a shadow area. I'm just going to use the same mix for this shadow area, just to mark out that it's darker here. And so the light is coming from there for now. That's all I need. And then there's some shadow areas here. And this here is all, the lace itself is kind of beigey. I'm just wondering what, maybe if I use some what shall I go for? A bit of raw umber, or I could use sepia. Right, sepia and raw umber kind of gives me that that look. Let's see what happens if I don't want it bright. Let's see what happens if I drop this in. I wanted to touch this previous layer and sort of bleed into it slightly. And I'm quite free with this. I'm going to leave at the bottle for now. So this lace is coming. I can leave some, when I do the lace bit, it's so detailed, it's impossible, and it wouldn't look good if I included all the details, so I can just leave some white areas. So all this is this color, for which I use raw umber and sepia, but with lots and lots of water, because I want it to bleed into my previous layer. I can also use a tissue to wipe off any excess water, and then I just wipe. Can you see when I wipe it over the page, I get these white bits. Now I want these white bits for the lace, so it gives me that. It doesn't look like anything now, but it will be good. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit more. Let it bleed in some areas. There's some shadows in this cloth. So this is my first step. Let's see how this turns out. So this hasn't dried yet, but that's okay, because I want the next I'm going to paint some of the colors of the roses, and I don't want them to look rigid, so I want them to blend into the background slightly. So the background is still a little bit wet, so I'm just going to touch it in places. So a bit of, I can see a bit of greeny yellow on the edges of this rose down here, and also this far end. So I'm going to paint that with some, just a touch of cerulean and lemon yellow. But really just a touch. So there, and also here I can see it. On this tip, on this tip, and this side, this downside. I'm going to go over this with maybe with some pink Maybe I can add some pink to this as well. And then this bit, as we go towards the middle, it's more and more pink. So I start with opera rose and just a touch of lemon yellow, really just a touch. And I want a really light, very watery, like a tea sort of texture, and I just wipe this all over this whole flower. This will be my lightest pink. I don't mind if it blends into the background a little bit. In fact, it's probably quite good if it does. I can see some pink here at the bottom. And then I do the same for the other one. The other one is more sort of peachy. So I'll mix my opera rose with more lemon yellow. So I get sort of an orangey color, but the outer leaves are quite light, so very, very watery. It's almost like I washed out my brush and I just use this wet brush for the first layer. See, you can see that that edge is quite soft, and that's going to be my lightest light. I can still define the background and make it a little bit darker at this point, so that that edge is quite soft. And then the middle will be, I can already drop in some of this same mixture, lemon yellow, opera rose, but a little bit thicker, maybe a different consistency, like a, see, I want it loose. I just want to play around with this, want it quite loose. And then the same with the other one, but for the other one I use a lot more, or I can just use the pink on its own, or just a touch of that. And this one is just touch where I can see darker or more intense colors. At this point it will still spread quite a bit. So maybe if I add a dark background, then this will pop out more. In fact, I think I'll intensify that background, maybe a bit of Payne's Grey and Payne's Grey Ultramarine, and I used the lavender before, so maybe a bit more of that. And maybe a bit of this orange. Let's see if it's a good mix. Maybe a bit more orange. So a bit more pink. It's quite creamy. I'm not sure if I like this. Add some burnt sienna and some more ultramarine to make it look more transparent. And I use it quite lightly, but let's paint behind this. See, these two colors will still, see, the edge is not that defined. I want it to blend in, to bleed into this layer. In some areas, not everywhere, but in some areas, it's nice if the color bleeds in. And I just use a wet brush. And now maybe let's work on the glass jar and the leaves. So I'm going to work on this glass jar. The stems will be quite light, like a light, warm green, maybe with some quinacridone and yellow and ultramarine will look good. So I can leave them out and paint them in once I paint in the shadows, or I could paint them in now and paint the shadows around. It doesn't matter. I think I will start with the shadows of this glass. So I marked out where the highlights are. Now I want to leave those absolutely white, the white of the paper. So the shadows will be similar to the background, but with a bit of green, because my greens, the green leaves and the stems will reflect, and I can see something greeny here. So I can, this mix I just mixed up, I can use here. So this whole area, and then the stem comes here, and then there's a highlight here as well. But I can see, maybe I introduce this blue color, bit of ultramarine. Yeah, I can see this ultramarine, this darker shadow, and it comes, it's here. And there's one here, and there's one line, and there's a shadow here on this side. So I'm just trying to see all the shadows and lights. A bit more blue and a bit more lavender, so whatever I used previously for my background I can use that. So a bit of lavender and burnt sienna. But these shadows are very, very subtle, because they are, and there's a waterline. I can draw that in now. I forgot to draw in. So they are in water, so there's my highlight, and the waterline is down here. So there will be a definite line. And there will be another shadow, highlight on that side of this. So that's a highlight there. There are things behind this glass jar that a fruit bowl and all sorts of other things, so everything is reflecting in it. So I can see something darker here, but I can go with another layer. I can see something a little bit orangey, a bit of orangey color, so maybe I can tap this off, and there's something orangey here. It's probably a reflection of that lace from the cloth. And then again, something more lavender here. And then it's light. And then there's my waterline. I will deal with that in a minute. So a bit more green, I can see, and this will be. So where this waterline is, there's a dark edge here, but I'm still painting these shadows in. So I can see something where this highlight is here, just around there. I can see a much darker shadow. There's one here, and where the edge of this bottle is, there's one this edge of the bottle, and then actually, this whole thing. And then there will be a highlight on there, so I have to be careful. I want to leave that out, this highlight. Just there. And then the leaf is coming here, so that doesn't matter because the covers. And then here we have it's actually quite fun to do, to guess whether you will get this right or not. Maybe add a bit more green. I can see some greeny bits here as well. I mean, it's not a dark shadow. It's quite a light shadow. And then there's a leaf there. And then I can see this is the water. So there's the water, there's some green stuff. I only picked out 2 flowers, but there's lots in the water, so there's lots of other bits. So now it's, I don't know how much you can see it's coming along. I'm leaving out this leaf because this is this might not be very dark. Well, some part of it is dark, but other parts of it isn't. So there's my highlight, and then there's another light a bit, and it goes down like that. And so this highlight, it's quite definite there. Goes like this. And then my stems are here, so maybe I can paint around this stem, and there's a bit of a darker thing going on. So this is where this waterline is, and I don't want it to bleed into that, because there's always the surface of the water is always seem lighter than what's under here, so there's a tiny bit of a line here. I can bring this down and this down. Now if I add some darker ones, you can see it's kind of coming together. Maybe this you can define this. There's something dark. I want this to blend, because this is in the water and it's very watery. So let's keep it watery. And this is going to be darker as well, but I'll add the darks in. So now this is still wet. I'll wait a little bit and then I'll add the stems. Maybe I will add a few more darks into this, these shapes. So I'm going to use the same mixture, but a little bit. So ultramarine, burnt sienna, and maybe some of this green to give it some. I almost want a dark turquoise kind of. See, I can see some really darks here, but I need this to kind of blend. I want a watery appearance, and I'm going to make this darker because it appears darker, and also under this highlight it appears darker, and on this side as well there's a leaf hanging down, so this appears darker, and also some of this area. And there's something dark. And then so there's a waterline. Where the waterline is, I'm just going to touch it with this brush. Let's see if it's dry enough. Not yet. It's not dry enough yet, but it's okay, it will do. I'll just touch it under this bit of dry bit. So it now looks a bit like, more like there's a waterline. And here as well I can see something darker here. And oh, that's my highlight. Let's not ruin that. Maybe make this more defined. And under here. And there's a leaf. Okay, so this is a bit too dark, so I'm going to dab this out with a tissue. It's too dark, and maybe if I put more darks, then it will be okay. Yes, let's just get rid of that then. Okay, while this is drying, I can perhaps work on the leaves. So let's use. I'm just going to use this kind of cobalt green light for the lightest areas, with a little bit of yellow. So all these some of these leaves are so, maybe that's not the right one. Okay, a bit more yellowy. So this is my lightest greens. There will be a highlighted edge. This leaf will be dark, and this one maybe has some highlights on it, so I'm going to give this a wash with the light color. It's good to leave some whites because maybe the light is hitting it. And this one will be dark, and there's some dark bits in the background. Maybe there's a leaf there. Let's paint in the stems. So quinacridone and just a touch of ultramarine, basically more quinacridone than ultramarine, and less water than before, and this should kind of blend into this wash. Yes, it will. and that gives us this watery effect. We want that. Maybe I can mix in a little bit of purple, a little bit of permanent rose, which I can see in it. So a bit of permanent rose and ultramarine. And then this will be the shadow area of this stem. This will be darker, perhaps like that. I can dab it if it runs too much, but it's quite nice when it runs into the previous wash. So maybe I wait a bit more and then I add some darks, and this one I can add the stem now. And also this leaf has some of the stems coming down, and this rose has a leaf there, so the stem is just here somewhere, but we have leaves here. So maybe let it dry a little bit. So let's add some more greens. I'm using the Chinese brush still. And now I'm going to go with the darker greens. So mixing quinacridone and ultramarine and a touch of pink. And it warms it up. Maybe a bit more blue. So I want it quite dark. And this leaf in the foreground, this is quite dark actually. I'm just pressing the brush down such as this, and also leaving out that middle bit. And then we have, there was another leaf here, and part of this was dark, but maybe a bit with a bit more water I'm going to. So this edge is dark, and then this edge is like that, and then this is dark here. And the pointy tip is dark. And then I have this leaf. Maybe I'll make the pointy tip dark. This is something I made up, so I'm not quite sure what it looks like, but I'm trying to make it look like a rose leaf. And then maybe it's highlighted here. Or maybe I can just fill it all in. And then a small leaf here. So I'm just pressing down this brush, and it gives me this look. And you see, I'm just putting the point of the brush to the point of the leaf, and then maybe I can blend this so the top part is more highlighted here as well. I can just wipe some of it off with a wet brush, and then it looks like that part is this one as well. Maybe this is too dark. Okay, to make sense of this, I'm just going to change this leaf. Sometimes you have to change things if they don't make sense, even if that's not how you see it. And then this leaf, again, maybe a bit of this cobalt green light. It gives me this variation. So I just want some foliage. And with something here, but okay, so there's this leaf, and then we also have some leaves here, maybe something very dark. So I'm mixing burnt sienna, ultramarine, and quinacridone, and that will give me a very dark, dark. I'm just gonna drop some darks in here, a bit more dark in the tip of this leaf and the tip of this leaf, so I get some variations. And then I said there's something dark here, so I'm leaving out the stem of this rose, and there's also maybe I can paint this here. So we know there's some leaves going on there, maybe it's coming over here. And maybe some more stuff here. So yeah, I can play around with this. I'll add a bit more background there. So here, no, I don't want to add the leaf there. So that's enough leaves, and I have some of those which is a bit warmer and lighter. So there's one like this, and there's one like this. And another one there. It kind of goes out, and so, and now we can't see these ones because it's behind that stem. Maybe let's darken this a bit. I could just use magenta to, I could just mix a green and darken it with magenta. That's very effective as well. So maybe this is because it's under the flower, it's quite dark. So this is permanent magenta. So let's maybe, I can see some magenta in this, but I can also see some very pinkish. This stem is quite pinkish here, so I'll add that in, and it also gives a nice contrast with the green. Don't know how much you can see it. And then I put some here as well in the water, because it looks like it's a dark stem, but it has this kind of maybe a bit darker. So I mix a green, and then I mix in some of this magenta, and the two will give me this dark, like a dark green. So this stem, I can use this for this stem, and just use my finger to pull it down so it breaks up. It's not so harsh. And then I can see this one as well. The water will, or the glass will distort, so this probably comes here and then it continues here because it slightly distorts. And I can also see, and there's a line here, there's that water line, so let's just draw it in, and then I can soften that. I'll just touch it with a wet brush and let it bleed downwards. And now we have this watermark, or waterline, here as well, there as well, and then maybe on this side as well a little bit. And there's, I can just put in some lines in this water. Maybe there's some disturbance in this water, just to give this that watery appearance. And then there's a, where that highlight is, there's one of these dark lines, but I'm going to soften that as well. And there, and it's going up there. So now it's more believable. And then here is quite dark. Now let's soften this line. Maybe it's too early. And then I can see something more definite going on here. What? I'm going to soften that and that, and so it's like adding darks and then softening them with the edges because they are soft shadows. There's something in this water still. This water is not completely white. I think that's probably enough for that. Okay, I don't want that edge. And then, oops, underneath, let's do a, just mix all these darks to add a shadow under here. Actually, I want a sort of purpley blue shadow under there, so I'm going to use lavender and ultramarine, and it just starts here. I want this shadow to be more blue because everything is quite grey, so this will go like that and like that. Bit more blue. So yeah. Okay, so let's define the flowers more, and for that I'm going to go back to this small flat brush, but I could use the large flat if I wanted to. So the light in here is getting a bit dim, so you probably can't see the colors very well. So I'm going to use a more intense permanent rose touch of lemon yellow maybe. This is the flower that has some yellowy bits in the outer petals. Let's see if we can define some of those. I'll start in the middle bit. So I'll just edit a wash where I can see shadows, and I could, what happens if I had maybe a bit of Naples. Yes, if I add a bit of Naples yellow, it's a more creamy consistency, and it just turns down that really sharp pink color. So let's try it again. So some of those petals I want light, and then there's an edge there, and then there's another edge, so I can go over this. This will be probably the brightest pink. So I'm just touching the paper where I see the darker bits, and then there's an edge, so it's darker here and here, and also here. And then this underside is actually a lot darker than the rest of the flower, coming down to here. And then I can mix some to darken that. It's too much. Let's try a different yellow. Although I can see this yellow, and so if I mix this in with the, yeah, this is the kind of greeny, pinky color that I can see here, so I can darken my pink with this. So it's like a dirty, more of not a pure color, but more of a dirty shade of the previous one. And now I need to leave out those edges, and then more yellowy here, or greeny, and here as well on this side. But this edge is very light, so I'm gonna leave that light, and this edge is very light but a little bit more greeny. I don't want less white, so let's make it like that. And then I can still add even darker in the middle. I can still darken that, or mute it, let's just say mute it, so I can you see this kind of dirty, this green turns it like dirty pink color. That's what I want to darken it with. So there's something here, something darker here, and then also down here. This is still darker, and this bit. And some of these areas, maybe there's a petal ending there, and there's another one there. I don't want to do too much of this, just so that it's believable. And then now in the middle bits I can maybe use my Chinese brush and make just with pure, it's quite a pure pinky color, but I need a really thick pink or magenta, no, pink, perhaps pink. So permanent rose, a very thick permanent rose. I just want a touch there. I can see a touch there and a touch here. I'm hoping this will blend in still. So I'm just touching that middle bit where it twirls into, where it compacts most. I can still remove some if I need to. Maybe here as well. There's a bit. Maybe there's another bit. So I think that's enough. It kind of looks more like a rose now. Let's see. And then let's work on the other one so it looks more like a rose. We do the same thing. So I'm going to use the small flat, but I'm going to make it more orangey. So Indian yellow and permanent rose makes that kind of orangey pink color, and I'm going to add some of that, but leaving out, so I can see a definite crease here. Yes, that's the word, crease. And then some darker areas here. I'm leaving the lights that are already there. Those are my lightest lights. Maybe a bit darker pink. And then there's one crease here. Let's soften it. Maybe it's too much color on there, because I want that quite light. And then there's a crease. There's some creases, so I can use this. Once again, I can use the greeny mix to mute it, to mute this pink. Just a touch of that greeny mix will mute it, and there's a darker highlight there, and also here. And then if I add this dark behind, that will bring out the top petal a bit more. There's something here. I can see all this is still slightly on the darker side, so maybe all this is slightly darker. And we just leave some light bits, not too many. And this one is all dark. Also, I can see something here. And there. And this is still darker, so it's more intense. That's a more intense, quite an intense crease. And now I can use a, actually I should change brushes once again. Maybe if I change the brush, but I can see some pinks here, so let's put it there, where it is, where the pink is. So I'm just touching the edge. I can see some intense pink, and I'm going to use the wet brush to soften it. Now I'll just wipe like this, and and then this is dark, so all this here is dark, and that, and there's a dark bit. Well, I can go over this again. And then this here is dark. This is dark. I'm going to switch to this brush to just do some of these squiggly lines. So for that I'm going to mix an intense sort of, that's too orange, but some of the areas are quite orangey. So that is quite compact again. So I can just paint some of those creases in that I can see. There's one, I can still define that. And then maybe this side is still darker, so when it dries I can go over it with a dark. And then some of the middle bits are even darker. I'm just going to use maybe a bit of magenta. A bit of magenta with the Indian, no, just the magenta. I'm just going to touch it with the magenta. So this bit is quite dark. Okay, that's magenta. What shall we put? Maybe a bit of what shall we add to it? A bit of that lightens it. Okay, let's just wait a little bit and then I can just touch it with some darker, maybe magenta blue, magenta, maybe magenta and, yeah, I think so, this magenta and burnt, this is burnt umber, magenta. Yeah, that's a good dark. So some of these creases are dark, especially in the middle. So I'm just going to paint that in. Some of them are quite fine lines, but I don't want to do too much again. Maybe a bit more down here. And a bit down here, just under this petal. And then there's a stem. Maybe I'll redefine that with a little bit of green mixed with this muddy red, because I can see that it's not pure, just one color. So that's my roses, and the rose is done. So I can now work on the, maybe a bit on the tablecloth, and also darken behind this cloth. That will bring it forward. So the tablecloth is quite detailed, and we're not going to paint in all of these details. I'm going to darken the area around it so that it's more, it brings out more of the cloth. And This was originally in the sun when I started painting, so I'm going to pretend it's in the sun, because at the moment it's not. Now my table is a dark brown color. I can make it whatever color I want, but I want the tablecloth looks almost white on this dark table, so I'm going to paint a dark background just beyond the edges of this cloth, and but I don't want this background to have a definite edge anywhere here in the distance. Instead, I want it to blend into the background, so the edge of the table is disappearing into the background, because we just pretend we can't see the end of it, and it just has more, it's just more appealing. Let's see if we can do that. For this, I'm going to start with a large flat brush, and the colors I'm going to use are burnt sienna and ultramarine. It gives me a really good dark. I'm just going to use this mixture for my darks, but before I add any darks, because I want this table to sort of disappear in the distance, I'm going to wash my brush in the water, dip my brush in the water, and just this section, just this middle section where my table will sort of blend in, I'm going to wet. This is just a bit of water, and then once it's wet, I can mix a quite thick mix of burnt sienna and ultramarine. So I want it more browny because the table is sort of sunlit. Maybe a bit more of this. Okay, let's see. So I'm going to go along the edges. So let's say my table is somewhere here in this line. So I'm just going to pull this down. I do want a hard edge where my where the cloth starts. So I'm just going to pull it down around this bit, and I want an uneven, so this edge is completely dry. I want an uneven edge there, because there are bits of lace bits going on, so it would be better to maybe do a dry brush around this cloth. So maybe if I keep my brush flat, let's see what I can do this way. If I, yeah, quite like that. So I don't want it completely even, because it's not. And again, I go up to this edge where my table will disappear, carefully avoiding my bottle and the leaves. If it goes onto them or into that area, if it bleeds in, I can just dab it off with a tissue. And maybe I'll wet the background a little bit more, so that it can bleed in just a little bit more. Look how nice this is. It just gives the whole thing a little bit of interest, and maybe here as well. So my cloth, a bit more, this is quite a thick mix. It's almost like a room temperature butter. So as you can see, I'm leaving little brush strokes, uneven brush strokes, because I want to indicate that there are some lace bits, but they are so fine, such fine details. I cannot paint every little thing in. and here as well. I have an edge here as well. Let's just paint that in, and yeah, I think that's enough. And I can see I need to soften this area here. So this is my table and my tablecloth. So now I can paint in those little details. Now again, there's so many details in this tablecloth, and it's not possible to paint every little bit of it. So I'm going to switch to the Chinese brush. Same mix. Since my table is this color that I just mixed with the burnt sienna and ultramarine, I'm going to carry on with this mix, because that's what's showing through under the table. And I already roughly drawn in some of the patterns, and I'm just going to touch the paper there with a very thick mix of paint to indicate those patterns, but really just a few, otherwise it's going to be too much for the eye to make sense of the whole thing. I'm going to sit down for this, and then I'm going to look at my cloth. So there's one pattern here. Maybe it's a bit too thick. If it's too dark, I can dab it off and then go over it again with a more diluted mix. I think it needs to be more, perhaps more browny. So let's go over this again, and then there's little bits here, and there's little bits just here. So as you can see, it makes the so these little bits make the pattern of the tablecloth. There's some bits here as well. So I'm just touching the paper where I see the pattern. I'm just touching my paper there with a relatively dry brush. It doesn't have to be exact. It just has to give that appearance of something going on. So there's this shape, and then we have these same little things going on. Of course, there's lots of other details in, but I'm not going to add all those fine lace details. It wouldn't be visually very appealing, like I said. You can just look at the cloth and keep your eye on that while you're keeping your brush on the paper. So there's some of these patterns here. And something here in this shape. So this can be quite loose. And then there's other things here. Maybe we'll do another bit. I can see something there. There's some sort of floral pattern, but like I said, so detailed that wouldn't be possible to add a line. There's something here. Maybe some bits there. And then of course it goes on. I don't need to fill this whole area. Maybe I can just do a few more bits here and there. And then I move over here. So there's little bits there. quickly a bit. And some other things going on. And here as well, this same. And maybe this brush isn't the best one. I would have been better off maybe with a small round brush for this one. So you have to figure out what works best for you. Okay, there's some other things. So this pattern goes all the way around, of course, so maybe I'll just draw that in, and there's little bits. Also it's slightly sort of not creased but pushed up by other bits and pieces on the table, so I'm going to leave it at this stage. I think that's enough of the lace pattern, so I will say that's my lace tablecloth. And maybe I can add some dark, just a little bit to define this cloth. There's some areas that are in the highlights, such as this. So I'm just touching it with a dry brush, basically. So this is different texture. So these lacy bits in the middle, some parts are highlighted, other parts are not. And I just pretend that's my, so this bit in the shade, this bit in the shade, and some of this in the shade. Maybe I can, some of this is in the shade, so maybe I can just give it a little bit of a wash as I'm going this way. So that will be it. That will be it. So that's my tablecloth. I mean, I could have gone a lot more detailed with that, and I think I'll finish at that. So this is the finished painting. As you can see the details a little bit more as I'm zooming in, and I hope you enjoyed the process. If you did and would like to learn more, please sign up to my YouTube or Patreon pages, and I hope to see you there.